I just want to thank all of you for joining us. I appreciate you all being part of the Agile Online Summit. I know we have a few track chairs here. We have a few speakers. So great to see everybody. We have this engagement workshop, and I really appreciate the work Mark and Carl. You're going to see, you guys have probably seen some of it already. You've seen some emails, probably been a little confusing. I apologize. But there's a lot of stuff that they've been doing behind the scenes, and I appreciate this. I'm glad that I got a contact that lent me Mark's contact information. We kind of got in touch and started working together. And Carl, as you're going to hear more about, is a professor that works on gamification. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun for the summit. So with that, I appreciate everyone. And I just want to turn it over to Mark and Carl, and they're going to kind of walk us through some things to help us build that engagement with our sessions.
Yes, thanks, Tom. So we're going to kind of just jump right in because nothing helps us learn more than modeling. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to grab a pen, piece of paper. It can be a regular piece of paper, a Post-it note, marker, pencil, whatever it may be. And I'm going to show you another view here in a second. So just make sure you have something you can write something down. And looks like everybody's kind of ready. And Carl, if you wouldn't mind watching the waiting room, I think as co-host, maybe you can let people in. That would be great while I take care of this. So, all right. So I'm going to ask you a question. And here we go. I'm going to show my screen here a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to give you kind of a fill in the blank here. And if you have to make this bigger, it doesn't matter. But I'll tell you what I'm going to ask you. So over the last 12 to 15 months, I think we would all agree that things have been a little bit crazy. Things have, in some circumstances, things have been struggles. Work has been a struggle. Maybe personal life has been a struggle. Maybe relationships have been more more strained over the last 12 to 15 months. On the flip side, there have been many instances for some folks where the last 12 to 15 months have created incredible opportunity, where change has really been a positive thing. So it can be anywhere on that spectrum, from struggle to really positive, and growth and opportunities have been realized over the last 12 to 15 months. So during that time, during that 12 to 15 months, I would imagine most of us have really been thinking about the way that we have thought about something in particular. And so that's my question to you. And I'm going to ask the question. So I want you to think about this. I want you to think about, during the last 12 to 15 months, I started thinking differently. I used to think X, right? So during the last 12 to 15 months, you kind of realize, oh, wow, I used to think X, but now I think a different way, right? So over the last 12 to 15 months, think about something that has really think about something you think about that's made that shift. Something you used to think about one way, but now, due to your experiences over the last 12 to 15 months, now you think in a different way. So just kind of write that down. I used to think, and whatever you want to talk about, but now I think, and then write how you think about it differently. So I'll just give you a minute to do that. So here's kind of what it looks like. I used to think, and then something, but now I think another way. Okay. All right. So hopefully you've gotten that filled out. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to have a little engagement. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. Now, one thing I want to tell you about is we know that many of the sessions that you're offering during AOS are pre-recorded. It's okay, we're going to come back and talk about that. This is just a way for us to get engaged with each other here tonight, and we'll talk about some of the things that we can learn from this experience and how we can apply them to pre-recorded sessions as well. But here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you some rules of engagement. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and there should be about 3 to 4 people per breakout room. And here are the simple rules. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to jump into that room, and you're going to, the shortest haired person with the shortest hair, you're going to be the timekeeper. All right? Oh, yeah, yep, Greg.
It's you, Greg.
He's checking it out. Yep, that's Greg. So the person with the shortest hair, you're going to be the timekeeper, right? Person with the longest hair in the room, you're going to go first, right? So what do I mean, go first? Go first means you're going to take 1 minute. The shortest hair person is going to they're going to have their time out, right? Johanna, you're going to love this, right? Time, follow the time. You're going to get 1 minute to share, I used to think, but now I think. And at the end of your 1 minute, then the other members of the group, you're going to take another minute, and they're just going to affirm what they heard. Just, acknowledge what you heard from another person. This is not the time to agree, disagree. Just kind of affirm and just kind of comment and just show that you heard what that person shared, right? At the end of that minute, then the person with the next longest hair goes. You repeat. The timekeeper does the 1 minute. When they're done, you can stop them. Then the group shares and affirms, and then again, go with your next person. So you should have time in 6 or so minutes to get around the group and just to share, I used to think, but now I think, using those rules of engagement. Well, thank you for everybody doing that. So now I just maybe 2 or so folks would like to just kind of share out what you used to think, but now you think, just to kind of talk a little bit amongst ourselves. And I see a couple people off mute, so go ahead. If you just want to start right in, go ahead and share.
Well, I'm off mute, but I'm always off mute pretty much. So I'm Jim York, and what I used to think was that improv was something we needed to do with close proximity. I use improv in a lot of my coaching and training, and for years I worked with improv artists and try to figure out, how do you do improv remote? And then all of a sudden, bang, we're all remote. And guess what? We figured it out. So I think differently that we can do improv remotely. It's different. It creates different challenges, but it is possible. And we're learning and we're getting better at it every day, as we would expect if we are improvisational.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So timely. So Carl and I, of course, working with different groups and different kinds of, mindsets, right? My company's name is Mindset. One of the things that we've had a lot of conversation about recently is human contact distinct from human engagement, right? And so this idea that we kind of conflated the two, right? Where we said, oh, human contact is necessary for your human engagement. So therefore, if we can't share air, we can't share space, I guess we just can't engage, right? So it's perfect, Jim. Like I love that. I am going to share that story with others because the people who are really stuck in that mindset struggle just to kind of like, well, show me, right? It's like, prove it to me.
Or there's a tipping point also. It's like for years, literally for years, I have challenged people that are much better at improv than I am to help me understand how could we do this remotely. And we pretty much came up dry. And there just wasn't a tipping point that forced us into solving. And the pandemic did that. That I find that with organizations going through change, you have to hit a certain tipping point before you lean into it, and you actually you're engaged and in a solving mode, as opposed to I'm still puzzled mode.
Yep. I have like a goosebumps right now. I am a total like this. I love my work to the point where I'm like, ooh, that's a tingly moment there. All right. Now,
hey, Jim, do you want to change your topic to for the conference?
Yes. So let's have another person
for
share.
Another day, Brandon. Maybe for another day. But yeah, that's I don't know. It's we'll leave that open.
Who else wants to share? Well, since that was a good one. So who else?
You want to share, Brandon?
Sure. So I used to think I had to coach face to face, and now I don't want to anymore.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting to have that and so I'm curious to know what's driving that desire for you. Have you seen advantage? I mean, obviously there's some advantages that you're seeing.
Yeah, I shared this with Michael and Mark. It's purely selfish. It's a quality of life thing. Like the example that I gave them was I went running today at 10:30 in the morning, in between sessions, and it's like I'm happier.
Yeah,
my family's happier, right? So I can go pick up my kid from the bus stop whenever I want to.
Right.
That's
and
awesome.
I still
Yeah.
getting paid, and I still have clients. So I'm, this is great.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
Awesome.
So, the experience that we just had was a great example of how human engagement can be done in a remote situation, right? I know not all of you knew each other. I don't know all of you. I feel like that warm, tingly feeling, like it's through me right now. So I feel like we've shared moments. I feel like we've shared deep personal thoughts, because there's a phrase I love to share. It's like, great questions predict the future before the answers arrive, right? Great questions. When we start with great questions, that question had nothing to do with our work. It had everything to do with our work, right? It had everything to, right? So it wasn't a targeted question. There was no mention of Agile in it. There was no mention of work in it. It was just kind of the setup mentioned, just, what do you think? And what do you think now, right? And we're all connected. And so I hope that you had that experience among your 3 people in the group. And that experience of being able to be connected is like so vital, whether we're doing this live or if you're doing it remote. So imagine, for those of you who are speakers right now, think about the kinds of questions you could ask people in a pre-recorded session. You could say, go answer this question. Take a minute. Hit the pause button and think about this question. I want you to answer this question and go do it. Right? And imagine me right now, if I was in a recorded session, I could literally set it up as if we were having a conversation, right? And I could say, take that moment, hit pause right now, go answer this question. And literally when you're done, come back and hit play. And when they come back, imagine you were asking them, what did you put? How powerful was that for you to answer that question offline, even though this is a recorded session, right? So by really adopting that mindset of great questions predict the future before the answers even arrive, it really helps us think about, wow, what can we do in a pre-recorded session or a live session, which is kicking it off with an amazing first question, right? So with that, it also tunes us into talking a little bit more about the overall event. And so for those of you who are speakers, where are our speakers, by the way? Show of hands, who's our speakers? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 speakers. Perfect, thank you. And so 4 speakers in the room, and I know the other track leads, we've kind of had this conversation, but I want to give you a sense of the event, right? I want to give you a sense of the flow of the event and how it's working so you can see how this moment can be harnessed. So here is the 3-day plan. I'll make this a little bit bigger. If you have been reading your emails, you know that Shuhari is kind of the adopted main theme across the 3 days of the event. And you'll also know that day 1, the first day, is really focused on that individual and team. And we get to the Ha stage, that kind of, the moment where you can, you've shown that mastery, right? Now you're moving into the team and the multi-team level. And by the time you reach Re, where you're kind of breaking out on your own and doing things in a really kind of organic way, but always staying true to the rules, if you will. And that organizational community level by day 3, right? So the way that the sessions, the way the pre-recorded sessions are being released, and the live sessions, we're going to talk about those in a minute, are being phased over the 3 days, match that plan. So hopefully that gives you some guidance. Now, what does one day look like? All right, so here's what one day looks like. Day 1, roughly at 9 a.m., we are going to hold a live session for anybody that can join in as part of the community. 9 a.m. Eastern time, by the way. We're going to have a live session. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that live session actually looks like. But there's going to be kind of a host of activities that happen during that live session. I'm going to jump right to it right now. You'll notice we're going to start with, much like we did today, right? That live session is going to be, hey, Lakshmi, how you doing? I see in the background you have XYZ. I see that, hey, Greg, what's that chart, right? Just making those deep connections with anybody who is actually tuned in. That's going to happen about 15 minutes before each of the live sessions. And then we launch. We start off with that big heart moment. We're going to start off with a question just like we did tonight. So during that live session, big question, get how many people were in the room doing exactly what we did tonight. Day 1, then we're going to start with, after that, we're going to have a content segment, which is going to be dedicated to Shuhari. It's going to be 10 minutes, just helping people build some capital knowledge, knowledge capital, right? Getting a little bit of kind of juice in their head about what Shuhari really means, setting that tone. We have a fun activity planned for directly after that, which is going to be a collaborative collage. This is going to be an opportunity for everybody who's participating. Grab that object in the background. Maybe I would grab my, here we go, I'll grab my, my Eastern bluebird, right? I'm going to grab my Eastern bluebird. I'm going to grab an object. And this object is going to symbolize something about my personal purpose. For those of you who know me, I am a trained and certified systems thinker in systems thinking, leadership, and development. So I use birds to talk about metacognition and how systems thinking works. Aim to make it simple, right? So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to capture that moment in a picture, and we're going to actually give everybody a Miro space. We're going to build a collaborative collage of their picture with their object, and then they get to add one word, and what I may add is something like systems thinking or something like that, right? So you all are going to get to see that collaborative collage being built. All right, we'll take a little bit of time, just like today, kind of going over logistics. Here's what the day is going to look like. And then and Carl's going to be sharing a little bit about this with you here in a little bit. We have an online game that we're going to link out, so everybody's going to get an opportunity to play an online game, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I won't spoil, Carl, I'm not going to spoil it for you. So you get to talk about that. And then we're going to end with a really kind of what we are calling the enrollment and heart close. And what that means is that anytime you have a group of people together, this is that moment to really connect, right? Folks, this is what we're going to offer you as the rest of the event unfolds. And this is my way of reaching out to you and saying, A, thank you for being here. B, I'm so glad that I see head nods and I see people that are like acknowledging that what we're talking about matters. And the rest of the event is for you, right? And so Tom and I are going to work on how we really form that enrollment. And that means getting everybody to just participate in the full 3 days. And then we're going to hang out for another 5 to 10 minutes. That's day one, right? So with that same level of detail, we will be planning day 2 and day 3. We have day 2 planned, but we're not going to tell you about that right now because that's going to take too much time. I just wanted to give you a sense of kind of how the 3 days are playing out. So this is the participant guide. The participant guide opens with Shuhari on the front cover. We then get into a kind of 2-page spread where we talk about the definition of each of the days. And then each of you who are presenters, you get your own page. So that form that you all filled out, for everybody who's filled out that form so far, we're taking all that information and creating the participant guide. And so in the guide, it has your key takeaways, any key terms. It has space and place for things like let's ponder. Like some of you have added big things like, hey, I want you to think about this, right? So we give you some space, give the participants some space to write down what they're thinking about. So Lakshmi, here's yours, right? So we have one of these for every speaker that's submitted so far. So if you have not submitted, you can submit and we'll turn your session into pages that look just like this. So so far, I think we're pretty excited about that piece, right? That'll go to all the participants.
This is a cool idea because I think, I mean, as someone that attends conferences, it can get really overwhelming to go from page to page and really figure out what is it that you need to think about to get the most out of the session. So I really like the idea of the participants guide.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of the anchoring place, right? So also, I think those, if you've been thinking about, oh my gosh, how can I use the participant guide like to really help me navigate that engagement, right? And that's another tool that you have. You could, in your pre-recorded session, you can also, just like we said, like give them something to think about and go write it down. You could literally say, hey, you have your participant guide right now. Jump over to that participant guide. Notice there's a resource there that I'm going to mention right now. Jump out to that resource right now. So you could get them engaged with you at that moment by using the participant guide. Some folks have more open-ended. Let me find one. Here we go. So Patricia has, hers is a little bit more open-ended, and that's, it's a choice, right? And so she has more blank spaces in. So she could actually say, like the Scrum framework and evidence-based management framework, she's not giving them a definition. And that's kind of an interesting tactic, right? Because she could basically say, from what I've said today, how would you define it? How does it work for you? So you put your information into the participant guide. I think that's really another cool way to use the guide. So good. So we wanted you to get a sense of like how the guide is really working as well. There are 3 reasons why people come to events. And I wanted to share this with you tonight because it really helps us think about, as presenters and speakers, even if we're doing recorded sessions, how important some of these other aspects are to the value of an event like the Agile Online Summit. First off, one of the reasons why people come to an event is to build knowledge capital, right? Just to build knowledge. And when they build knowledge capital, obviously it adds to their understanding, it adds to their credibility, it adds to their capacities, right, within organizations. And so that's important. Obviously, we need to be helping them gain that information. However, how do we build knowledge? The truth is, we know from metacognitive science is that when people just get presented information, it hasn't turned into knowledge yet. And so that's why aspects like, and inclusions and tactics like the participant guide are so important. Because what they do is they offer you an opportunity to say, I just said this, I gave you a piece of information, and now I want you to think about that information to the point where it starts to be knowledge for you, right? So just because you've presented somebody something, you've said something in front of somebody, I always call it like, there are moments where we want to expert in front of people, if you know what I mean. Like we just kind of want to be the expert in front of people. The reality is our next step is to get them thinking about all that information, asking them good questions, asking them how it relates to them, asking them to break it down, asking them if there's another perspective or a perspective that that information can be viewed from. And if you do that, you're helping them build knowledge, right? So as you think about your pre-recorded session, there's just some little tactics for you to kind of keep in mind in the back of your head. Am I really getting them thinking about this content? Am I using the participant guide? Should I be asking them some other questions to help them make that transference from information to knowledge? Second reason people go to a summit or a virtual event is social, right? Social capital. We are humans, we want to be social. And so there are tools, and I think Tom can speak to this. The Slack channel is a way to be social, right? And so think about that as you present in your pre-recorded sessions. You could ask them, give them something to do. Go to Slack, share this, say this, do this, contribute to this, answer this, right? You can do that kind of work in your pre-recorded session and then making it social. If you are in that live session, you're going to be participating in the social aspect. So we encourage everybody to join if you can, according to time zones. We know it can be a little tough, but we're doing 2 a day, 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock Eastern time, and hopefully we can hit the bulk of folks. Really some people may be in bed at that time. But that's another way just to consider, is there something you can do in your pre-recorded session to increase social capital, and B, by taking part in the actual live events, can you be actively playing a role in that social capital building for your participants? Yes. So those 2 pieces, building knowledge capital and social capital, that gets people in the door. And so, Jim, hold on to your socks if you have socks on. I don't know, can't see down that low. Nope, okay. This is gonna, Jim, you're gonna love this, right? That gets people in the door. However, it actually doesn't keep people coming back, right? And so when you think about what you are doing, which from the very beginning, when Tom said, this isn't just an event, we are a community. We are a group of people that love each other, know each other, are friends with each other, we work hard together, we co-build things together. We are a community. And the reason you're a community is because you do all those things I just said. When you build things together, right? When you do something together, when you build communal capital, when somebody basically says to a room of people, hey, we need to unlock the collective wisdom of this room right now because here's challenge A, go solve that some way, shape, or form. And instead of me experting in front of you for the next hour, I'm just going to give you the challenge. You go figure it out, come back with a co-built solution. That's communal capital, and that's what keeps people coming back year after year, day after day, minute after minute, saying AOS is the place for me. right? Big, right? And so anytime we can do that throughout this event, that's what we're working for. And if for whatever reason, maybe, you've been thinking about this and you just haven't had a way to verbalize it, think about it now in that framework of building knowledge capital, social capital, and really the big thing at the bottom is that communal capital, as Jim's phrase, right? When you co-build something, then it matters, right? Then it's right. What questions does that bring up? What ideas does that bring up? Do you want to float something by us in terms of, hey, I was thinking about doing this in my session, should I do that? Those are things that we can also take a couple minutes, but what are your thoughts?
So in the interest of improv, is there a possibility that sessions spawn additional sessions, like a follow-on Q&A especially for the recorded sessions? So I'm curious as to what opportunities are there to go with the flow, and if there's interest that emerges in something, is there space for that to be accommodated?
Tom,
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a good question. And I think we do have some space for that. We've talked a little bit about doing some things. So like you saw what Mark pointed out, like we have the live portion in the morning and live portion in the afternoon. We're going to make, and we'll get to I know some speakers want to do live sessions too, and we're going to talk more about that. But we also have in the afternoon, we kind of a live wrap up. And I think too, we've talked about doing things like maybe a panel and ask me anything. There's some things we're kind of throwing around. So kind of to your point, depending on the interest, we'll be able to, I think we have some space where we could potentially pull some things in or, easily put something together. I think that's not a problem.
Yeah, I'm curious, Tom. I'm trying to remember. I've attended so many conferences over the last year. That's one thing that remote's actually enabled. Is there a thing like spatial chat where there's like the hallway conversations? Is that did I miss that, or is that something that's going to be available?
Yeah, with what we have, so we've tried to do. I'll be honest. I tried to explore a few different technologies, but what the problem was is we were trying to get to this point. It was basically like about a month ago. I had 3 or 4 options, but it was like, oh, it's not going to be enough time. So I apologize there. I was trying to run down some leads there. There are, as you guys, if you go to different conferences, you'll see different things out there. But what we're trying to do, and I think with what Mark has put together, we're trying to do some of that with some of these live sessions where we put things together. We can do some things with breakout rooms and kind of create some of that. So I think we'll be able to do some of that with what Mark has in mind.
Yeah, it's a great question, Jim. And I forgot to actually mention this as well is in day one, we do have some time for that. We have an AMA session because I know some of the leads had made a suggestion. I think it was maybe Casey or maybe Kemi had said AMA would be a good inclusion. We on day 2 we're launching a program called Laser Coaching. Coaching, of course, is very near and dear to all of you, and laser coaching is something specific we use in the event industry. Laser coaching is a one-time coaching session, so it has kind of a structure. And I believe Tom has done some outreach.
Chris Lewis is going to do that. I think he had mentioned.
Yes, and just so y'all know kind of how that works, I can show you this. So the idea behind laser coaching is
no laser beams. I just want to point out, no one's hurt with laser coaching.
Oh, I was definitely going to use laser beams, but well, so much for that. Tom, he squashes all my good ideas. But anyway, the idea of laser coaching is you get folks to apply for this ahead of time. So they send in and say, here's a deep challenge. Like this isn't kind of like, hey, tomorrow I need to provide X, so can you give me an idea, right? This is a deep challenge. Like this is like things I'm really like an opportunity I want to harness. I just don't know how. There's a struggle at my organization and I've been working at it and just hitting roadblock, right? Whatever that may be, something deep, kind of different than an AMA where you can kind of just popcorn and go back and forth. Laser coaching is I'm going to be very clear about the problem. Then what we do is the coach, Chris, is going to kind of navigate, ask questions to figure out if that truly is the problem. Because, people say, oh, this is the problem I'm having. And then you get asked a couple questions and realize that's really not the problem I have. It's really something actually different. And then, we move them toward what are they going to commit to doing? What do they need to learn to fill the gaps that they don't have? Confirming their commitment, and then kind of after the coaching, really moving into that, hey, check back with us, reflect, jump on Slack, let us know how that went. that format is something I've shared with Tom. We're going to do that on day 2. And then, so that y'all know, in the afternoon live session, the other thing that I think is really good, like in virtual events, like if you have what's basically like that opportunity to upgrade the VIP status and the coaching status, we have an opportunity to really, again, tug at the heartstrings of everybody and get people to join your community deeper. And so we're going to dedicate some time to saying, here's what happens, like folks, like we'd really love all of you to join the VIP. Here's what is special for you. So on Friday, on the 3rd day, then what we'll actually have is a couple sessions unique for the VIPs and a live session for those who who want to take coaching. So we'll have sessions for them exclusive, and that gives you an opportunity to connect with people as well. So I agree with you, Jim, where I think that spontaneity is something that we can work toward. I think often in the last couple months, we're almost 12 weeks into the time Tom and I have been working. We keep saying this is a bit of a transition year where we have some things that are kind of planned for 2022. And I think what your suggestion is a great idea. So.
Greg
Okay.
has a question, maybe? Do you have a question?
Yeah, quick question. Can you go back to that page that had the Slack channels on it and the squares and your whole,
The mural?
yeah, the mural board?
Sure.
So
let me just pull this one, Greg?
Yeah, that's it. So are we, now I saw that and I thought about it. Is there going to be a Slack channel for each session? And the reason why I ask that is that if it's pre-recorded, right?
Mhm.
If it's recorded, then they can activate the Slack channel and chat about what they're seeing in the pre-recorded session. That way you get that interaction, and myself as a chair or the person speaking could interact with the people on that Slack channel. Or you have one major channel per
Track, maybe? Or
track.
Mhm.
And then they say, hey, up next, we're going to show this. This is a recorded session. Feel free to chat, and everyone can see what all that's about.
Yeah, I think we could probably do something. I mean, we could do any
I
of
don't make
them,
it
but I
too
think-
complicated. If we did one
Yeah.
for each recording, it might be too complicated, but maybe we do,
One per
like a
track, maybe, or
yeah. And then because if you have time slots,
Mhm.
you can announce on the track, hey, this pre-recorded session or a live session, whatever's about to start. And then we as hosts can also facilitate that discussion, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Because I mean, that way there's interaction in the pre-record. Otherwise, there is none.
Mhm.
But then, I mean, maybe we do pounds, or I don't know. There's things you could do, but that would be something. When I saw that, I was wondering if they were matched one-on-one.
There's one reason to hold a virtual event. And that reason, I'm curious if anybody, maybe some people like to take a stab.
You live in New Zealand and you're in lockdown?
Oh, okay. So one reason to hold a virtual event is because you can't get together face to face, right? So we have that whole human contact, issue, right? We want to solve that. Okay.
I think to
Anybody
build
else?
on that, to really open it up to the whole world, right? So now you have no limitation. You have people that can join from any time zone that are interested.
Okay. Yep. So there's an equality issue, and so we can really make this available to folks who otherwise couldn't be. That's good.
It's generally more cost effective for attendees to attend virtual conferences than live ones.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. One more. Oh, as soon as I say one more, that's always really.
Well, at least you don't get stuck in traffic. So that's my favorite one.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So those are all absolutely 100% true. As an event designer, what we're always looking for is that really kind of deep reason to have a virtual event. And the reason that we work with our clients to hold an event is that you have a behavior that you want to change. You know that a participant is desirous of a behavior change, or you believe that a community, if we changed our behavior toward a different behavior, we could accomplish X, and you lay it out there for a group of people and say, folks, if we could change our behavior in this way, ta-da, right? Things would be incredible. And then the same token, people attend events, right? We talked about before, knowledge capital, social capital, communal capital. Why? Because you want to change behavior, right? That's really the main reason to have an event, is you want to change behaviors. How do you do that? Well, you get people thinking, you get people building new knowledge, you get people connected to other people, you get people building communal capacity and communal capital. You do all that. Why? Because you're trying to change a behavior. So what I always encourage you to do right now, so those of you who are speakers, those of you who are track leads, if you want to do it from a track perspective or from another person in your track's perspective, what I would like you to do is I want you to take a stab right now and document down, and then I'll give you like a minute to do this. What is the behavior in your session? What is the behavior you want to change?
I didn't raise my hand as a speaker, but I am a speaker. And the longer one I had is, we can help our federal government to keep up with all of what's going on in the private industry. And I thought, okay, I'll do an Obamaism and say, yes, government can. Change people's behavior about their thoughts about government, what can happen there. Right?
Yeah, so I love that kind of moment I think you just witnessed, is that as we really think about behaviors, sometimes we have an opportunity to go a little higher, right? And really think about what the purpose of your session is. And I think there's always positive outcomes to that, right? Because I think sometimes when we're thinking about every word that we say, we think about, I want to get a lot of content in, sometimes we stop forgetting about the behavior that we're really trying to change. And so maybe it's less about more content and more about less content, right? And maybe it's just like we really got to keep going back to that behavior that we want to change. I think that's what I heard you say, Michael, is that after thinking about it, I started thinking, oh, wait a minute, it's complex, so I need to be simpler.
I Steve Jobs did.
Yeah, exactly, right? Good. All right, who else?
I can go. So my session is about enabling better collaboration. So the behavior that I want to change, or I want to enable and promote, is starting to create a more generative space so everybody can truly collaborate. And I think as facilitators, we have so many opportunities to do that, especially in this virtual world. So.
Yeah, beautiful. Who else? Thank you.
This is Casey. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to go with Casey. I went first earlier, so I'm waiting my turn.
The behavior that I want to enable is problem solving with the track that I'm leading.
Yep.
So people use agility in all kinds of ways, but a lot of times it becomes more dogma following, and we forget about the problems that we're trying to solve.
Yep. And I also think, like, when we look at changing behaviors, we can also feel like that phrase, like that's like problem solving, right? That's big, right? And it can kind of feel like, are there items that we can really, like, is that an emergent behavior? Is that an emergent property of different behaviors? You know what I mean? Like, problem solving can I tell somebody, hey, let's go work on problem solving, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's so hard, and it's why it's so important, right? And then as we struggle with maybe I have to think about some of the emergent behaviors, and so one of the ones that I think, or I'm sorry, not the emergent behaviors, the leading behaviors, right? So as we think about, what is problem solving, maybe we have opportunities to break that into those leading behaviors. Like, for instance, being perspectival. So if we're going to solve problems are generally, problems that are solved from a single perspective usually create more problems. right? So it's like, if we solve something from a single point, a single perspective, we can feel really good about that solution until somebody walks in the door and says, yeah, but what about, right? And so as we think about big things like behaviors, like problem solving, can we look and say, one of the behaviors I want to actually influence is people taking different perspectives, people being perspectival. And what does that then require? Right? Then that requires me to actually create exercise and create these moments where we practice, right? Where we pull out our ability to be diligent practicers. And saying, when I get presented with a challenge, like I'm going to be purposeful about the perspectives I look at that issue from. I shared this, I believe, with the workshop, right? The bird, so it's kind of like, so let's do this with some people. So, what is this?
Dog toy.
Right? From a dog's perspective, I agree with you. Like I'm sorry. Like if I take these to somebody's house that has a dog, like these become a dog toy. Like so, and my instant reaction is like, oh my word, no, not my thinking devices. And they're like, what is a thinking device? That's what this is, right? Right. So this is a model for thinking and systems thinking, right? So that's exactly right. If I'm an ornithologist, I look at this and I call it by its name. If I'm a cat, I look at this as
Snack.
dinner, snack, right? So there's all these kind of different perspectives, and we can practice those things very, very simply. So, Casey, I think you're definitely onto something, and it's the challenge of doing big work. Is that as we think about these things, like, gosh, I'm desirous of this group of people to be real problem solvers, and at moments I think that feels so big, and it feels like, but I think they need more help, right? I mean, I think we can catch ourselves saying that. I think they need more help because they being us, we don't seem to be getting it. We don't seem to be able to really crank up our performance in problem solving. So what are some of those leading things that I could dive into? Anyway, hopefully that's a little helpful.
Yeah, it is very. Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else?
So Casey, I'm so glad you went first, because a nice segue into the topic. One of my topics is authentic coaching. Just to sum it up, it's really kind of helping you to solve your problem rather than my perception of your problem.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, Greg shows the bird too. Yeah. Oh, that didn't sound. Greg gave you the bird. Sorry about that. I couldn't resist. Yeah, that's wonderful, Jim. Yeah, that idea of being perspectival, right? It comes up again, right? In the coaching model, where somebody will share a specific perspective on a problem, and somebody else has a perspective on that problem. Which problem are you trying to really solve? Mm-hmm. And from your perspective, Jim, it is making sure, and I think I heard this correctly, right? Making sure that that person in the room that you're working with really does see that problem from their perspective, mm-hmm. and then makes that commitment to solving that problem from that perspective.
That's an angle, but really the focus is on the coach, and the coach not bringing in their own preconceptions to the space and making interpretations, and it's retaining authentic problem ownership with the person the coach is helping, not solving the problem for them, enabling them to solve it, and keeping the focus on what is the real problem here. And so often what we hear about coaching is really more somebody coming in and taking charge as the problem solver. And, unfortunately, we've got confusion in the marketplace as a result, and the buyers don't really understand what they're buying when they're looking for a coach.
Right. Yeah.
It's really interesting. So Jim, this topic is in the coaching track. And what Jim just said, it crystallizes exactly what I was hoping for the track, which is changing, back to your original question of changing the behavior. Allowing this kind of conversation and this frame to change the behavior of how we view coaching going forward.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep. And wow, doesn't that really give anybody who coaches, you see how critical the questions you ask are more, than saying, oh, well, I think this is what you're trying to fix.
Mhm.
Right?
So
'Cause
this
if you're-
actually connects to your shuhari. It's when you come in as a coach, you have to put on the white belt. You don't come in with the black belt. You put on the white belt because this is new, and you are now the one who is being taught by the person who's bringing the problem.
Wow. Love it.
Writing that down. Put on the white belt. I like that, Jim.
Yeah. It's interesting, just a parallel in systems thinking training, we go through the belt, right? So it's kind of a synergy there, a little bit different angle, but I love that perspective of putting on the white belt.
Yeah.
You
I've
know,
never been here before, so
Yeah,
I'm now in a learning mode.
yeah, love it. It's awesome.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
I just had the shiver moment again.
Yeah.
Whew.
Me too.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, this is great. Who do we have another?
I've actually got a second track I'm speaking on, and this gave me time to actually come up with the thoughts because I didn't the first time around. And that's problem solving beyond frameworks. So I got to give my hand to Casey and Jim for helping me figure out how to say that best. This is related to SAFe, a debate on scaled agile and where it's gone from 2011 to today. Problem solving beyond frameworks is the behavior I'd like them to learn from out of that.
So that's interesting. So so I'm not an agilist. So I get to put on my white belt right now, right? So so what does that mean?
To me, it follows just another common saying, meet the client where they are, put on your white belt, understand what they have first, and then help them figure out their own problems. Don't just throw SAFe at it or Microsoft Teams at it because they don't have communication. Make sure you're getting them what they really need, instead of what you think they really need, which what is SAFe used a lot of times these days.
Just so you know,
Gotcha.
Mark, SAFe is a framework that's used for scaling Agile. Just level set.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's like, I have an expertise in something and I've gained that expertise by synthesizing various models and approaches. And I am ever at the ready that when I hear of a particular problem, I have my library of models and what I could tend to do if I am helping solve a problem with frameworks first, is that I hear a little bit of what's going on and my mind is already saying, oh yeah. As soon as they end, I'm going to be like, I'm going to toss that model out there because that's the one they need. And it's almost like sitting there with my hand up going, can I talk now? Can I talk now? Can I talk now? If you could be quiet talking about your problem, I can tell you what the solution is, right? Is that rough?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like they go with the popular thing that a lot of companies out there. I can't remember if this was Lisa Atkins or someone else, but they kind of say it like the Agile. Hey, I want to do the Agile because everybody else is doing the Agile, and that's how it's become with SAFe now. Is because everyone else is doing it. Leadership in a lot of companies, including government, are saying, well, they're all doing it, so I'm behind. I got to do it too, when they don't even know what it's really used for. And so let's step back and look at the problems and discuss, is SAFe the right thing and how can we use this scaled agile framework, is what acronym SAFe stands for, which is a great marketing ploy. It works great with COVID times. Yeah, be safe. Get on the SAFe bandwagon.
Got it.
Michael, thanks for doing that, because I think I have a second session. Do I, Brandon? Isn't there one on learning loops? Yeah, okay. So I have another session on activating learning loops. And just to sum this up, it's trying to get the change in behaviors from people treating a review, like at the end of an iteration or a sprint, into an event that's not about kudos and velocity, but about finding the way forward.
Yes. That's similar in systems thinking to systems thinking loops. right? Where so you have an action that brings about a reaction, and then the reaction feeds back into the action as a learning.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's double loop learning, basically.
Yep. Whew, another tingly moment. This is awesome. Yeah. So early on, Tom and I shared a lot about how systems thinking and agile, obviously, are the systems thinking people would say, systems thinking people, here's the ego. Systems thinking people would say, system thinking came first, and agile the model that came from systems thinking, because all models come from systems thinking. Okay, I'm very cautious of not saying that. Although I kind of just did, but I didn't say I agree. I just said that's where there's a relation. That's the relationship between systems thinking and agilist, is that the systems thinkers are confident that they came first, and therefore all models are built off of systems thinking. But anyway, all right, moving on. I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague Carl, and so we've had a lot of conversations around. Thank you for sharing those behaviors. The question then becomes, let's give you some tools and tactics. Like, we've been talking kind of high level. We've been talking about kind of from that systems view, from that mindset view, from the behaviors view. We've kind of worked our way through a bit of our systems thinking about the event and how the event components play in. And so Carl is anything but just a tactician, believe me. Guy is brilliant. We were neighbors too, by the way. And seriously, Carl and I have worked together for almost 30 years now, which I can't believe we're even we must have started working together when we were 10. But anyway, I'm going to turn the floor over to Carl, who's going to share a little bit about the game platform with you and outcomes of that. And then all of you have access to a course that Carl produced about creating engagement in a virtual session. And so he's going to talk some tactics about that. So Carl, it's all yours.
Yes. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I was 6 is when we first met. So that's
You both had hair at that time, right?
Right.
Just to clarify.
A lot. Yes, we did.
No, I didn't.
So anyway, what I want to do is talk about. Oops, I shared the wrong thing there. I want to share my entire screen, not just part of it. Oh, okay, that'll work. All right. So what I want to show is the game and how the game works. So basically, what will happen is the learners will be at. We're going to do, if you remember from the outline, we're going to do several games in a day. And the first game is basically a polling game, and it will allow people to actually say what they're interested in or what they're thinking about from an agile perspective. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to introduce this game, give out the URL, and then folks will be able to simply click on the cards, and they'll be able to then to sort them into most important, important, or least important. So we took a stab at some of the concepts and ideas, but what we want to do in this session is maybe take 10 minutes or so and get some game questions or content that you might think is relevant. Now, for the first day, we're going to do, okay, what do you think's the most important, or least important? And then at the end of the day, we'll be able to report out, 90% of the people said describing agile methods to colleagues was the most important, and the least important happened to be asking the right questions. It doesn't mean it's not important, it's just not as important as some of the other two. But the second day, what we want to do is we want to ask questions. We want to do a little, what we call fact or fishy, so true or false. And so we want to ask some agile questions. And we thought, hey, we've got the speakers together, and it might be a good idea to try to get some questions. So Mark, if you could introduce, I'm going to introduce the Miro board and try to get some concepts related to the true false questions, that would be very helpful. Now, if you don't have the answers now, that's fine. You can think about later, or actually the questions now. You can think about that later. But I thought we would take a few minutes and jump into Miro and add some questions that you think are fact or fishy. Now, one thing to keep in mind, this isn't, we only have a playing card. So writing, Moby Dick or something like that, some real long book, Harry Potter, or Gone with the Wind, I think, was over 1,000 pages. So it's got to be kind of a short question. But if you could do a short question, that would be fantastic. And we would have the question and the answer. So the idea would be that the folks would play a game, the true false fact or fishy game. And then once they played the fact or fishy game, we're thinking someone would then play the game with the group. So you play it individually, you'd get a score 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. And then once you've done that, then you will go ahead and someone will lead the entire group through the game. So the idea is that you play it once on yourself, by yourself, thinking through the answers and the questions and what the content is. And then you play again as a group to verify or to discuss some of the things that might have been a little controversial, or you weren't sure that was the right answer, or you were wondering what the right answer was or why that was the right answer. You'd have an opportunity for discussion. So there is a class that everyone should have access to about creating and designing interactive sessions. It has a number of different activities and actions that you can do. If you're not in that, let Tom or Mark know. We'll make sure we get you in there. Everybody has ability to access that class and to find out and learn from that information. It's a series of small micro learning sessions. And so I think there's maybe 10 or 12 of them, and you would just go through that session, and each session is focused on a specific aspect of adding interactivity to what you want to do in terms of your presentation. So it's some tools and tips, not only for now, but for any time that you're doing virtual presentations. And the last module, one module does talk about the importance of participant workbooks, and then one module also talks about the concept of stage presence and the idea of how to look good in terms of lighting and audio and look good and sound good and those types of elements. So you can peruse through there and pop into what modules you want or think are relevant. There are quiz questions and activities. You don't have to do those. Of course, it would help if you did do those, but it also models a little bit. You'll see some of the things that I'm going to talk about in a moment. It models those. I'm not live there in that session, so you can see, oh, well, what techniques are being used in order to engage me as the learner when I'm not really live with the person to have that kind of discussion. So it's also designed to model some of the behaviors that we're looking for and that will put you in a really good light as you go through the conference.
Question, will this be played like at the track level or on the individual session level or overall at the entire conference level?
Mm-hmm. Mark, do you have that on mirror? Do you want to pop that up again?
Yes. I'm going to actually show, Carl, I'm going to go ahead and show the game plan.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, let me show that as soon as I
The simple, while you're doing that, the simple answer is it will be not at the track level. I'm sorry, not at the individual session level or the track level, more of the overall conference level. And Mark, I'll let you talk to that.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark. So basically what we're going to do is during that AM session, we're going to play the Identifying Agile Priorities game. That'll be played the first time in the morning. We will then grab the results so that then in the afternoon session, you'll actually have the results. Actually the afternoon session, then you'll play the second time. So we'll set, because it could be a different audience. It may be the same audience. We'll play the priority again. And then you will share Tom will share the results from the first play session. So on day one, 2 times playing the priority game.
Let me just interject real quick. It also may be interesting to see if throughout the course of the day, for some reason, priorities have changed. So it might be because different people are answering the questions. It might be because people had insights. It might be because new information. So we'll collect that data, and then we'll be able to, on day 2, as Mark's going to talk about, we'll debrief that. But going over and thinking about how that data might change could be very illustrates can be very revealing as we look at what the content is providing us.
Yeah, the second day then, we're going to share the results from the second gameplay of the priority game because it happened in the afternoon. You'll go ahead and play Fact or Fishy. You'll do the group, so everybody will do it individually. So to answer that question a little bit, Mark, individuals will play the Fact or Fishy. Those results will come in behind the scenes. However, then you'll also then play it as a group, right? So you'll be able to review the game together, do the exact same thing in the afternoon. Day 3, we're going to have a game, which right now it's kind of like commitment to 10 big actions. It's a definitely maybe not commitment kind of game. So some actions, because all of the speakers, you're providing some action items to follow up. And so again, we're going to kind of go through the playbook and put down some of those actions and then have people identify whether they're definitely going to do that, maybe not. We'll have some different categories. We're going to play that game in the morning session. We will produce the results, and in the closing or the afternoon session on day 3, we'll give the results of that.
What I'd like to talk about next then are some of the tactics. Some have already been discussed, but basically wanted to formalize some of our discussion around the tactics so that you have this, and we can also make these slides available as well so that you can download those or look at those, or you can take notes as needed. These are just some really kind of roll up your sleeve things that you can do in a recorded session to help make it seem more personal, more intimate. Now, I will say one thing is that having a session where someone's speaking right to you and on kind of a one-to-one session is kind of an intimate session. So it's kind of like sitting across the desk from someone, which is kind of a nice way of thinking about interactivity instead of filming somebody who's kind of far away. We're seeing someone on the stage. So one of the things that you can do is think about asking and starting your presentation with a provocative question at the beginning of your session. You might say, what do these 3 things have in common related to Agile? Or what do you think is the percentage of people that are not following all the steps in Agile? Or why do you think most companies fail at implementing Agile? You could start out with any kind of question that you want as this open loop. Now, we as humans do not like open loops. We want them closed. So open loops keep our attention. Most of the time when we start out with instruction or content, we're starting out with a closed loop. You will learn 3 things about the Agile process, for example. That's not really a good way to start. What you should do is do you know the 3 most important things about Agile? Or do you know, or have you thought about, or what's your opinion about? Those kind of questions will prompt people to have this kind of open question in mind as you go through your presentation. And you don't have to say, oh, this is the answer. You could just kind of have them go, okay, that's 1. Okay, that's 2. Okay, that's 3. And people will kind of get that. And then the idea is that you answer at the end or during your session. So this provides people with paying attention and focused on it. It's kind of like Law and Order, right? Law and Order is a perfect open loop, right? If you've ever been in a situation, it's 11 o'clock at night, you're flicking through the channels, and all of a sudden Law and Order comes on, and now you can't go to sleep until you find out, does that scumbag go to jail? Chances are it's a repeat. You just don't even remember what happened and then you're like, oh yeah. So the idea is that you want to spread that out. You can have questions throughout your presentation to pique the interest. A lot of times we think when we present that if we get people's attention at the beginning, we've got it for the whole presentation. Completely not true. There's a thing called a curve of interest where you have to keep catching people's attention. So you want to do that as you craft your presentation, as you think about your presentation. What am I going to do at this point to get their attention? What am I going to do here to get their attention? It can be different strategies. For example, Mark asked this earlier, take out a piece of paper and draw something on a piece of paper. Asking someone to do that, holding up a piece of paper, providing instructions to do that can kind of force people into that action or activity. And it's very helpful when you get the drawing perspective involved in terms of having people do things. So writing in the manual is good. drawing on a piece of paper is good. Those things can help. And you can do things like, hey, draw 3 lines on a piece of paper. So I might ask you, hey, okay, quickly draw 3 lines on a piece of paper. Now, even if you're not like, okay, Carl, I'll do that right away, you're still thinking about, oh, what would I draw on that piece of paper? Would I draw 3 straight lines? Would I draw 3 perpendicular lines? Would I draw 3 curved lines? What would the lines look like? And then what you could do is you could kind of set up the learners. So I asked you to draw 3 lines on a piece of paper, and you either thought about it or you drew it. And then I could say, how many of you actually drew a triangle? Let's talk about the need for specific instructions, because how many of you have that, right? And take a look at your piece of paper. Do you have that or don't you have that? You might even want to go to Slack now and say, hey, did you draw a triangle? Kudos to those who did, but those who didn't, it's not your fault because I didn't give very good instructions. And the point is, you need to have good instructions. So you can kind of go through that process, having people draw and do some kind of action. You could have them do, for example, a model, or there's concept of the model. Those can be very helpful from actually asking them to do an activity. Another is you can do an appropriate pause. You can say, think for a moment about how you would approach this situation. I'll give you a minute. Okay, now that you've thought about it, now you can go on to the next point. Well, let's go on to the next point. So having that pause really kind of forces the person who's watching it go, well, what am I going to do, right? I'm probably not going to stop it. I'm probably not going to. So the chances are they're going to think about it at some level and be engaged with what you want them to be engaged with. The other thing is you can ask them to pause the recording, or you can even encourage them. Hey, I asked you to draw an image, and please just take a moment, pause the video, draw the image, and when you're done, just unpause the video. So sometimes, we're thinking that the person watching our video is 100% engaged with what we're doing, and that's not always the case. So one of the things you can do is by giving them specific instructions, it re-engages them with the content that you're provided. So that can be another good way to think about it. The other thing is, I lots of times ask people up front is, hey, I'm going to do this session. And when I do the session, I'm going to ask 3 things from you. Just 3 things I want you to do for me as a listener of my content. So first, I'm going to ask you to think about, that should be think, not thing. Think of a real world problem or situation that you would like to address through this presentation. And so every time I say, well, think about your own situation, I want you to think about that problem or concept. In fact, it'd be really helpful if you wrote down that problem and concept so that you have it right in front of you when I say, hey, remember that concept I asked you about? I want you to write that down. Second, I'm going to ask you to take notes and record your thoughts in a participant guide. I know it's much easier just to watch the video and kind of listen, but to really be engaged, I'm going to invite you to actually take notes. And third, I'm going to ask you to recruit a friend. It's always good to learn from a colleague. And if I say something crazy or something you don't understand, you'll have somebody to bounce ideas off of in the Slack channel. If you don't have a friend, look at the Slack channel, because probably there's somebody there that's wondering about the same point I just made, or wondering about a content element or a comment that I just said. So by setting up that expectation a little bit up front, now I wouldn't start with this. I would start with an opening hook. Like, do you know the #1 reason Agile projects fail? We're going to talk about that. Now, before we talk about that in too much depth, I'm going to ask you 3 things so we can get to that answer. First, think of a real Agile project you've done and whether it's been successful or not. So write that down, and we're going to talk about that as we go through. Second, I want you to use your participant guide so that your projects don't fail in the future. And third, recruit a friend so that you two can work together to solve these problems. Now, let's talk about that issue of failing projects, right? So I kind of work that into my discussion and allow people to have this. So don't start with this, but add this into your presentation. Another thing you can do is ask learners about a personal learning objective. So I often say, look, I have objectives that I want to convey to you in this session, outcomes I want you to achieve, but you probably have your own outcomes. So take a moment and write down the objectives you have for this session. And at the end, check to see if your objectives were met. If not, you might need to go to another session. Contact me in Slack if there's confusion, but ask other conference attendees for clarification, but have those what you want to get out of this particular session. So by doing that, it gives the person, there's actually a bunch of research that if we write down our goals, we tend to achieve our goals. So if somebody's writing down the goal that they want out of your session, they'll either achieve it in your session and pay more attention, or they'll try to find the answer somewhere. And that's kind of that coming together in social capital that Mark talked about before. So ask somebody to, hey, take a moment. I'm not going to look at it. I just want you, obviously, because it's recorded, but I just want you to write down your personal learning objectives so that you can see what you want to get out of this session. And you can even suggest, this is kind of like before drawing something, but this isn't specifically what you're telling them to draw, but you're suggesting, hey, you might want to create a concept map. A concept map is a drawing of all the key concepts I've talked about in this session. And as a matter of fact, I might even encourage you to post your version of the concept map in Slack, which you can do that as well. So I've been in conferences where like it almost became a competition, like who had the better concept map, which is not what you want, but some of those concept maps were really incredible. There were some really good artists in that particular conference. So think about these kind of suggestions that you could ask the participants to do and help up the ante. And then finally, as I said before, leverage that participant guide, talk to it, talk about what you've put in there, and encourage them to get involved with that guide. It will help them retain the content that you're providing to them, help them think about the behavior change that you want as a result of retaining that concept. And really, they'll say, hey, that was a great session. I really got a lot out of it. And look at all the notes I took and look at all the information I have. You know, we think that people naturally know how to take notes. I can tell you that they don't. And even if they learn how to take notes in college, sometimes we forget how to do that. So having those prompts and having that information really will help people focus on getting the maximum from your session. So any questions about that I can answer, or anything that was not clear?
I haven't seen the participant guide, but is it going to be where they can fill it out? Is it fillable, electronically fillable, or is it designed to be printed and handwritten?
Yeah, actually, normally I do them so that they're printable, and so that then they can kind of not feel compelled to type away and kind of more scratch in the margins and things. I think it's just easier that way. So yeah, Mark, the intent is for it to be printed out, something they could have with them and scribble on.
There's actually, to that point, there's actually some research to show that taking notes on a computer is less effective than handwritten notes. Now, there's been some other research that said, well, maybe not. So the jury's still out, but definitely it does give a different feel when you're taking notes. And the other thing about that, and again, not everybody has a printer, so they could put it up and kind of write on it, is that it feels a little bit more like an actual session than you're sitting at your desk at home on the computer. It's that extra piece that kind of draws that person in, rather than having it up on the computer and trying to watch it and trying to go back and forth.
And I know you're still doing the wonderful job of putting the participant guide together. Would we get a sneak preview of it before, so we could sort of use that as a guide for, thinking about how to make our sessions more engaging?
Yes, actually, so Tom and I were just talking about that. I think what we're going to do is start feeding those who have it, who I've finished it, feeding that out to you so that you can take a look at it. A, for yes, so you can kind of see what's in it. B, just to see if there's some things you would want to tweak. And I think here's maybe an example of that. I mean, so there are some things that obviously because of formatting that maybe we had to paraphrase, or we had to shorten a little bit, or we had to kind of just, make work for the guide, but we don't want to change the meaning for anybody. So we just want to be very cognizant of that. So we'll zap it out to you, see if it still works for you, if the things really line up. And then if you have additions, you can feel free to send those back to us and we'll get those in.